All right, so let's look at this phylogenetic tree. So this RH tree, is it the newest one? And it's, in this case, we don't know anything about time. We just know how do these stories resemble each other. So I'm not sure that this is the newest one, but it is the most different in terms of if you compare to like these other guys, they're all, see how the dots are really close together? In the case of this tree, it does matter how closely together they are packed. And the reason why I know that that length of the branch matters is because of these little numbers here. So these little numbers are giving you a clue that the length of each of these branches is not drawn at random. It's not for style. It actually conveys information. So the longer the branch, then the further away it is from the ancestor. So that node would be an ancestor. So this would be the story that generated all these other stories, which doesn't necessarily exist, right? Because okay, there wasn't like one place that from there then people in Africa tells the same story than that people in East Asia, or maybe there is, but I find it unlikely. Like the things I would conclude from here are in, let's see, the Little Red Riding Hood. It's written, well, the Brothers Grimm wrote that, and it closely resembles GM, a bunch of versions of GM, which is the story of grandmother. So Little Red Riding Hood is very similar to Story of Grandmother. And then this, The Wolf and the Kids, is over here. So that's The Wolf and the Kids. And it's more common in Africa and, oh, interesting, in India here. But then there's East Asia. See, in my thought, India would actually group over here. So apparently in India, they have something that is The Wolf and the Kids. No, it's their story resembles more The Wolf and the Kids. Then, because that's the green dots. Then what the story in Asia, which is Tiger Grandmother. So that, see the TG? All right, do you need to know anything about these stories? No. What I'm trying to teach you here is how do we go about interpreting a tree? And this tree here, so going back to that idea of whose, of time, we don't actually know. This is a tree that is not rooted. I'll give you more examples of that. But since you already studied this long enough, I wanted to show you, for example, let's say that this TG10 is the very original story, and then from there, the other stories stemmed. So this would be the root, and then this would be the most close related to that. So that's like the second version of this story. And then these other ones, and that, and everything else. So that's if I assume that that's the root. But I don't actually have information to assume that this is the root. So if this tree could be read in any direction, so maybe the root is this Africa one, and then all the other ones are derived from that, then this would be the most recent common ancestor, and everything else changed from there. Or I could pick this one as the root. So if we can't actually clearly see which one was the one that was most ancestral, then the tree is called unrooted. So oftentimes spiral things like this are unrooted trees. So we don't have a sense of which one gave rise to which. So good. All right, now you know more about Little Red Riding Hood than you wanted to. So that chart is, it said in the paper that's a phylogeny. So what does phylogeny mean? The philo is a race or tribe, which is we are trying to group things by how alike they are. So when we do phylogenetics, we're aligning a bunch of sequences, And then we're trying to see, okay, which group descended from whom. But as I said, oftentimes we don't have the ancestral sequence. They're just inferred. Unless you actually have fossil sequence, then you might actually have the ancestor. So people like reconstructing the evolutionary steps to see, okay, how did we end up where we are? And I can't remember if it's exam or homework. I have like a bunch of minions that you're comparing, and you are seeing, okay, which one is, so it's mostly the simplest to more intricate, or like the one that accumulated the most changes. So whichever has the most changes, that's the one that you would say is the most recent. And to look at phylogenies, we use trees because that's like the easiest way to interpret their relationships. So here's a simple tree. This guy is here, so every time there's a dot, and it doesn't have to necessarily have a dot, but every time there's an end or the junction here, these guys are called the nodes. Okay, so the dots are called the nodes. And so the in red is what people say in computer science. So these are nodes, node. These are called terminal nodes because there's no other branch coming out of them. So terminal nodes. And then these are internal nodes, that because more branches come out of it. Okay, and then in biology, we'll call the terminal nodes leaves. So these are leaves. This one would be the root. And this one, I don't know that we call it anything. I think we just borrow from computer science as node. So yeah, so terminal nodes are leaves, and internal nodes and root are also node. All right, so well, that's me now. If you didn't write it down, you have it written down there. Okay, so if you what normally do we have here in the leaves? And they can either be different species. So remember in the KISS gene exercise, there was KISS 1, KISS 2, and there was like fish or frog, zebrafish, and whatever else. So in this here, maybe I would have only KISS 1 from the zebrafish, frog, monkey. So in the leaves, I might be comparing different species, or I might be comparing within the same species paralogs. So like KISS 1 and KISS 2, or maybe there are 5 versions of the KISS gene. No, KISS 1 through 5, which ones resemble the other most. And it can even be both, right? It can be on the leaves, you can have orthologs or paralogs. So remember, orthologs, that's gene, or doesn't have to be gene, it's a DNA sequence that, so if it doesn't encode any functional, either mRNA or ribosomal RNA or tRNA or a protein, then it's not a gene. So you can have a DNA sequence. If it's from different species, that DNA sequence is an ortholog. If it's different versions within the same species, like within the same organism, that in that one cell, it has these different versions, then they're paralogs. Okay, so in here we can be comparing either DNA sequence or amino acid sequence. So amino acid is protein sequence. Or we can be comparing morphological characteristics. So this is how people did phylogenetics before we had the DNA or protein sequence. You'd group stuff by color or whether or not it has a fin or whatever. So that phylogenetic trees are pretty old. The idea is pretty old.